it's very hard to say exactly where we are at this point. I do think that the new deadline suggests that the administration is giving itself a bit more time just to get some of these agreements over the line, because some of them seem to be stuck. I mean, we've been talking with Japan for all these weeks, and yet we can't get it over the line. So I think there's a bit of wiggle room. But also, I'm struck equity markets are just shaking it off. I mean, you look at the Japan market, right? It's just, equity markets don't seem to be bothered by all of this.
Do you think perhaps the thinking for the equity side, at least, is that the worst is over, that tariffs will not go up to 200% on China, for example? So maybe thinking that the worst is over, and when it comes to the fiscal policy, Trump is done. So maybe we don't really have to worry a lot more from this level. Do you think that's what's happening?
So I agree. On the fiscal side, we probably now have a bill. We kind of know where we're going. It's not great in terms of fiscal dynamics, but at least we know we can put it under models and kind of discount it and so forth. On the trade stuff, you're right. I mean, it's not 200%, 150%, but it's still very substantial. And when we hear that things could go back to April 2nd, remember that was a trigger for a major sell-off. And yet the suggestion that we could go back to that seems investors to leave them completely unimpressed. But I do wonder whether we're a bit too confident going into the next few weeks, because there's a lot that could happen. Not necessarily on a global scale, but with individual economies. There might be some economies get picked on, quote unquote, suddenly coming with much higher tariffs than expected, and that would have an impact on the growth trajectory.
Do these letters to 12 countries matter a lot to what you do in terms of your research? Would it sort of at least give some clarity in terms of what's going on and what he's thinking?
It helps a little bit with the direction in terms of getting a sense where we land. But remember, again, it's about the details, right? It's even last week, 40% tariffs on re-exports from Vietnam. What does that exactly mean? What is that potentially just Chinese goods or any good? And what's the ultimately, what's the impact? That we need to know the details here to really see how things play out.
And I know that details really matter, but how do you view what was going on with Vietnam here? I know that tariffs, we talked about it, sure, 0% on the U.S. and 20%, but of course the 40% on the transshipment goods and so on. But someone was pointing out that it's very important to pay attention to the fact that there was no mention of Chinese FDI into Vietnam for re-export. Do you agree that it's actually something that we need to pay attention to?
Potentially, yes. I mean, that might mean that actually goods produced by Chinese companies in Vietnam are not subject to 40%. That because it qualifies Vietnamese goods. That may very well be. But again, we haven't seen the end text. And it may just be that these are rough agreements, and then negotiators start to change their minds as they as they watch CNBC and get to learn the details. And so it's an evolving process, and I think that's the problem in itself. We won't dispel the uncertainty immediately. And remember, what matters for economies is the uncertainty. We just don't know where exactly we're going to land. And I don't think the uncertainty is going to dissipate this week. It will take a few more months.
Yeah. Marty, comment on this.
Fred, good to see you again. Listen, the uncertainty, right? But you were talking about how markets have the way they're pricing. I mean, they're just incredibly complacent, right? Is this, and I got to put it out there, right? Is this the bet that is this the taco trade that at the end of the day all's going to come good? He's not really serious, and it's not going to be nearly as bad as people had initially feared.
I think you're right. It's the view that there's a taco trade here. However, the more there's a taco trade out there, the more that might incentivize the U.S. administration maybe to follow through on some of these issues, just to kind of cement their reputation in markets and kind of make sure that their threats aren't completely watered down by people just ignoring them. And so I think we're getting to a point where too much taco, it just leads to indigestion.
Okay, all right. Fred, we were talking about the U.S. Vietnam deal, and the details are not official yet, right? But from what we know so far, the reports, et cetera, it's the 40% transshipped, right? That's gotten a lot of people's attention and gotten people thinking maybe this is the model that we're going to see for the U.S. And other Southeast Asian countries? Do you think it will be?
Certainly, there seems to be some kind of element that transshipments are targeted. Remember, we also had some noise around Mexico, for example, earlier a few months ago, where the U.S. administration suggested that goods coming via Mexico to the United States should be treated differently than Mexican goods. And so there is certainly an element here whereby the U.S. tries to restrict this burgeoning business of transshipments, and ultimately that means that Chinese exporters will see some of the back doors being closed. But remember, it's all about the implementation. Is it purely the transshipment of goods, kind of things that go into a port, immediately out again, or is it Chinese components that find themselves into the production process in these local economies? That would be a much, much taller order to kind of eject. It would be much more disruptive for local economies. And we don't have yet the answer as to how far this 40% transshipment rule really reaches. And I think that's really what markets are waiting for.
Yeah, Fred, I think I would agree with you, right, that we need more clarity on what this whole transshipment idea is actually going to be implemented or executed, right? Because if it is down to a percentage of components in a product that come from China before they're assembled or whatever and then shipped out of Vietnam, that could affect not just trade, obviously, but also investment in not just Vietnam, but a lot of other Southeast Asian countries from China, yes?
That's right. And investment is a big growth driver in these economies. We always talk about, oh, their exports are doing well, and that's ultimately the engine of growth. But it's, in many cases, also the foreign direct investment pouring into Vietnam is something like 4 to 5% of GDP, which is quite considerable. In Malaysia, it's even higher than that. And if that were to stop or even be delayed, that would have a meaningful impact on growth in these economies as well. And it's likely that businesses at the moment are slow walking some of these investments because it's not clear what the future trade environment really looks like. And that's a good example of where uncertainty has broader impact on economic growth, not just narrowly on trade, but really on investment decisions, and that amplifies, of course, the effect. And I don't think we have fully seen that yet. Second half of this year, you're likely going to see more of an impact on investment because there's always a delay, right? Some projects still get executed. The decision was taken 6 months ago, but new investments are essentially delayed, and that's going to hit growth in the third and fourth quarter of this year.